Hoo! Ha ha ha! Hi everyone, Hoothany Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Rammstein album, Untitled. This is the newest full-length album from one of Germany's biggest bands of all time, Rammstein. One of my favorite bands when I was younger, Rammstein is one of the few groups from my adolescence and my teen years that I could look back on pretty fondly. As their biggest projects to date, like Sehnsucht and Mutter, as well as Reise, have all aged fairly well. You could say the band had a pretty great run from '94 to about 2004, but they have had a hard time staying relevant and cutting edge with the slow fall from grace that new and alternative metal had in the mid and late 2000s, as a lot of the band's fan base was gained through exposure on traditional media outlets like American rock radio as well as MTV. It's actually miraculous the band got as much traction as they did, considering their weird alien presentation and the language barrier. But I think that just speaks to how good the band's music was during their peak of relevancy. They just had this weird knack for dark, dramatic, dance metal ragers that no other group at the time did. I see Rammstein's '04 record Reise as a bit of a breaking point. I'm not surprised after this album that the band hit a bit of a creative wall. It may not be my favorite album from them, but it's definitely their heaviest and most crushing, to the point where I think they lost their groove a little bit on this album, as a lot of the tracks on this thing were smothered in these somewhat slow arena-sized guitar riffs. After this project, it's not surprising the group would go right into a record like Rosenrot, where they essentially started penning even slower, even more brooding material, most of which I could really just take or leave. It's not a god-awful album, and up until this point, Rammstein has yet to release a project that is absolute crap, and there were some pretty great instrumental climaxes on this project, especially on the cut Hilf Mir, but without their edgier production and dance music roots, I wonder how much appeal Rammstein really has for me. Rammstein's follow-up album in 2009, Lieb ist für alle da, is often hailed by fans as like a bit of a return to form, but considering the thunderous production as well as instrumental bits like the whistling solo on the track Rotersand, it's pretty much just an extension of the previous two albums. But here we are now, 10 years later, with a new album. The band also excited fans with a pretty great debut single from this record, Deutschland. Being no stranger to social commentary as well as taboo subjects, of course, this single was attached to a very colorful and very controversial music video depicting all of these symbolic renditions of Germany's finest hours as well as greatest horrors. The lyrics of the song explore the cognitive dissonance of being proud of who you are and where you're from and your heritage, but simultaneously acknowledging all the terrible things that may be packed away in your country's history. Vocally and instrumentally, I'd say the song is pretty Rammstein by the numbers, with its rave synths and driving kicks and heavy guitars and Till Lindemann's very theatrical and authoritative voice. But still, it's easily one of the best written singles the band has released in like 2 decades. Radio is also a pretty fun track on the album, definitely a poppier take on the band's usual form. Sounds like something that would have made more sense to release back in 2005 as a last power grab for pop appeal as the modern rock radio well was drying up. I love the subtle Kraftwerk influence on the hook of this thing. The lyrics are pretty intriguing, depicting someone that sounds like they are from East Germany before the fall of the Berlin Wall, and the music and the radio this person has access to is limited, so the music they want to hear on the radio, they have to sneak away and listen to it in secret. The grand chorus of singers on the track ZEIG is pretty stunning. Same thing with the crushing thrash riffs on that same song as well. If you've been listening to Rammstein for a while, the track Outlander is a song that really you just have to shake your head at. It sees the band bringing back the dance music influences of their early years back in a big way, but now with a more grand instrumental presentation like on Reise. The crushing riffs on this track sync up pretty tightly with the 4/4 kick drums, the growling bass line, the synths on this track kind of whoop like something you'd hear out of an EDM festival. However, the song is attached to this cartoonish and kind of tasteless display of colonialism, making it seem like it wasn't really as destructive as it truly was. The lyrics of the song, though, don't seem to deal directly in this, though. It's more about world travel and sleeping with people that you meet in other countries that speak different languages. And again, to a newcomer, this song and this music video might seem like a uniquely weird perversion or something, but if you've been listening to Rammstein for a while, you know that just about half their discography is based on some kind of sexual antics, and sometimes that can drive them into making a tasteless or a cheap song. Speaking of which, we have the 5th track on this album, Sex, which I'm surprised it's taken Rammstein this long. I'm actually kind of blown away we're not at Sex Part 3 at this point. And yeah, the song is about sex, and lyrically it's about as on the nose as you would expect, to the point where I'd say it's obnoxiously basic, especially with its low-brow, bar band guitar riffs roaring throughout most of the mix. After this point, though, the band starts whipping out more turgid, long-winded ballads like we're back into Rosenrot territory, and the results are mixed, even if we do get tracks such as the harrowing PUPPE, which features some pretty incredible vocals. I mean, the screams on this thing are throat-shredding. It's a totally manic performance. The heavy drums on this track as well are incredible. The synthesizers take on a very eerie John Carpenter-ish vibe. The following tracks, though, do get pretty underwhelming, though, even if some of the singing on Diamond is pretty dramatic. After that, in my opinion, is maybe the weakest and blandest song Rammstein has ever written and recorded. The mid-paced riffs on here and drums have little to no soul or groove. The guitar solo on the track is absolutely boring. The synths sound like something out of a bad prog song. Tattoo instrumentally is another very formulaic track for Rammstein, but it does not have the benefit of being one of the better written songs here. The lyrics just seem like a very humdrum poetic tribute to being tattooed and not much else. However, we do have an incredibly twisted closing track on this thing, where lyrically it seems like we're being told a story about maybe a kidnapper who sexually abuses their victim and then maybe leaves them to drown in the ocean. Every single bit of progression in the narrative here is not spelled out exactly, so some of it is left up to interpretation, I guess. But it does seem like a pretty dark and disturbing story, and again, if you're familiar with Rammstein's history, putting out a track like this at this point on the album is not really all that surprising, as unsettling as it is. My biggest issue with the track, though, is really that instrumentally it does leave a lot to be desired. It's nearly as bland as every other track on the back end of this project. Overall, I thought this one was a pretty okay return after 10 years, although I guess I shouldn't be too surprised that it came out just so. It has been a long time, not only since Rammstein has put out an album, but also a long time since I think they've put out a mind-blowing album. Yes, unfortunately, this one, in my view, does trail off pretty quickly after the first leg, and especially around that midpoint, so I'm feeling a strong 5 to a light 6 on this one. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Rammstein, forever.